Hi, this grammar lesson is on punctuation. In this lesson, I'll go over commas, apostrophes, and the punctuation involved when we're using quotation marks, when we're quoting. First, let's go over commas, and you can find more information on this topic from Purdue Online Writing Lab. Let's go over some of the rules when it comes to commas. The first rule is we use a comma to separate independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, which is one of the fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet so. So we studied this a few weeks ago. We call these compound sentences. Here's an example. She offered me a cup of coffee, comma, but I wasn't thirsty. So here we have two independent clauses, which are complete sentences, and then the fanboys. Does this sentence need a comma? Why or why not? I am hungry and thirsty. No, this sentence doesn't need a comma because we're just combining two words. They're not independent clauses. Do these sentences need commas? If yes, where do they go? You can pause the video here and read them over. Number 1. The university is concerned about alcohol and drug use among college students, so a meeting was scheduled to discuss the issue. I need a comma before so because I'm combining two independent clauses. Number 2. Many college students study on weekdays and enjoy themselves on the weekends. In this one, I'm not going to put a comma because I don't have an independent clause after the conjunction. Number 3, drinking coffee can be healthy, but doctors recommend not to overdo it. So here, I have a comma because I'm combining two independent clauses. Number 4, I will drink some water and then go to the gym. Here, I don't need a comma because I don't have an independent clause. Rule number 2, we use a comma after introductory clauses, phrases, or words. Here I have some examples. After a clause, even though it has been a long day, comma, I still have energy to play pool. Here we have a clause, a dependent clause, so we want a comma after that. After a phrase, in the article, comma, the author discusses. We also use commas after transition words. However, comma, some Americans. The third rule is we use a comma to set off non-essential parts of a sentence. You want to use a comma at the beginning and the end. The waiter, comma, a handsome young man, comma, asked us if we had any questions about the menu. Here, I'm interrupting the sentence to give more information about the waiter. If that's the case, you put a comma. We use this a lot when we're introducing authors or authority in your essays. For example, Malcolm Gladwell, comma, a famous author and journalist, comma, wrote the book Outliers, blah, 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 blah. So here you can introduce who someone is, but we want commas on both sides. Rule number 4, we do not use commas to set off essential elements of the sentence. Here's an example. I think that the waiter who just walked up to us is our server. This is necessary in the sentence to know which waiter I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one who just walked up to us. In this case, we don't use commas. We use commas to separate 3 or more words, phrases, or clauses. We looked at this when we were studying parallel structures. Example, today I ate oatmeal, comma, a sandwich, comma, some fruit, comma, and chicken with rice. So here I have a series of 4 words. Tomorrow at work, we will process new orders, comma, check existing orders, comma, and email all our customers. Here I have verbs, 3 verb phrases. Make sure that you use parallel structures in a list. The 6th rule is we use commas to separate 2 coordinate or equal adjectives. They're similar types of adjectives. She has a happy, easy smile. So both of these adjectives are describing smile, and they both express an opinion. My grandmother quilted a beautiful will blanket. In this case, these are both adjectives, but I'm not going to put a comma here because beautiful, they're not equal or similar adjectives. Beautiful is the opinion and wool is the material, the fabric. So in this case, I don't need a comma. Where do the commas go in these sentences? Pause the video here. Number 1, in order to get home, we need to travel over several narrow, winding, treacherous roads. Here, we need a comma because this is an introductory phrase. He hit the ball. Number 2, he hit the ball, dropped the bat, and ran to first base. Here we're combining verb phrases. Number 3, besides skating, Gabriel really enjoys playing the saxophone. Here we have an introductory phrase. The Founder's Bridge, which spans the Connecticut River, is in need of repairs. Here I'm adding additional information to explain to the reader what the Founder's Bridge is. When you're defining something or giving additional information, you want to use commas. Rule number 7, use a comma at the end of the sentence to set off contrastive elements. Example, some say the world will end in ice, not fire. So if you have a not, some kind of negative to show contrast, you would use a comma. Rule number 8, we use commas for geographical names and dates. San Francisco, California, we use a comma between the city and the state. May 18th, 2015, we put a comma between the day and the year. Quotations, rule number 9. Use a comma after a reporting verb like claims, argues, suggests, warns, says, writes. Here are some examples. The author writes, so if you have the author's name like Gladwell writes or says, so the author's name and the reporting verb, and then you have the quote. If you write that, the author writes that, you do not use a comma. Use a colon if you introduce a quote with a complete sentence. Thoreau ends his essay with a metaphor. So this here is a complete sentence and it's setting up the quote. Here I use the colon. Time is but the stream I go a-fishing in. When not to use commas. Don't use commas to separate a subject from a verb. Okay, even when the subject is long, you don't want a comma here. The main witnesses in the trial of Miller versus Jameson testified in court today. So this is the subject and this is the verb, so I don't need a comma here. Number 2, don't use a comma in between 2 verbs or verb phrases. You should rest and eat some food. I don't have 2 independent clauses here. I'm combining rest and eat, so I don't need a comma here. Number 3, don't use a comma between 2 nouns, noun phrases, or noun clauses. My best friend told me that she was moving and that she was going to miss me. This here is not an independent clause. We don't have 2 complete sentences, so I don't need a comma here. Number 4, don't put a comma after the main clause when a dependent clause follows. San Diego has a lot of tourism, because the weather and tourist attractions are excellent. You don't need a comma when the dependent clause comes second. Apostrophes. Use apostrophe s for the possessive form of all nouns except plural nouns ending in s. My mom's shoes. So mom is singular, so I'm going to put, these are the shoes that belong to her. the nation's capital, the author's claim, the suspect's lawyer, the car's owner, Julie's car. So we use this apostrophe S to show possession. We use S apostrophe, so the apostrophe goes on the outside for the possessive form of plural nouns ending in S, like the student's exam. So it's plural, more than one student, the hero's misfortunes, the professor's opinions, the parents' friends. Let's talk about individual or joint ownership. This can influence where the apostrophe goes. To indicate individual ownership, make each owner possessive. My mom's and dad's cars. So here I have both of these have apostrophe S because they each have their own cars. To indicate joint ownership, make only the last owner possessive. My mom and dad's car. This means this car is owned by both of them, so the second one is going to take the apostrophe S. We use apostrophes in contracted forms too. Can't is the contraction of cannot, don't, do not, wouldn't, would not, isn't, is not, it's, it is, or it has, there's, there is, we're, we are. These contracted forms tend not to be used in academic writing. What's the difference between it's and its? Many students get this confused. Here are some examples. It's a hilarious movie. This is short for it is. It's been a really long day. Here, this is actually short for it has. It has been a really long day. The committee took its time. This one doesn't have an apostrophe because it's possessive. It's describing the committee's time or their time. And it's one committee, so it's singular. So this is the possessive form. Let's practice. Where do the apostrophes go? You can pause the video here. Number 1, we're going to be late if you do not hurry. We, apostrophe R-E, it's short for we are. Number 2, the children's books are on their desks. Children, apostrophe S. Here, we need the apostrophe S because it's possessive. The student's lunch break is at 11:30 a.m. The apostrophe is going to go outside because this is a plural that ends in S. Be careful. Children is a plural word, but noun. It's a plural noun, but it's irregular. It doesn't end in an S. So here you would put apostrophe S. This is a regular plural noun, so the apostrophe is going to go outside. Number 4, Megan and Susan's desk is dirty. The apostrophe is going to go only on the second one because they share the desk. Number 5, Megan's and Susan's desks are dirty. In this case, we need apostrophe S because they each have their own individual desks. Quotation marks. When do we use quotation marks? Remember, for direct quotes, they are the exact words of the speaker or writer. And here's an example. In MLA formatting, you want to make sure that you have the author's name, the reporting verb, a comma, and then the page number goes at the end and the period goes outside. If you mention the author's name in the sentence, but if you don't mention the author's name, you need to put it at the end in the parentheses. Let's talk a little bit about italics and quotation marks. Italics, which are that slanted font or text type, are used for large works like books, newspapers, magazines, movies, TV shows, like The Simpsons, Moby Dick, which is a famous novel, The New York Times, which is a newspaper, National Geographic, this is a magazine, and Newsweek, a magazine. Quotation marks are used for sections of works within these things, like titles of chapters, which can be inside of a book, magazine articles, poems, short stories. High science. This is an article in National Geographic, so I want to put this in quotation marks. The road not taken. This is a poem. A dream. This is a short story. For a quotation within a quotation, we use single quotation marks. Here's an example. The reporter told me, when I interviewed the quarterback, he said they simply played a better game. So this is a quote within a quote. I read The Turn of the Shrew in 9th grade, George recalled. Again, this is the title of a short story, and we're going to put it in single quotation marks because it's a quote within a quote. Let's practice. Can you find the mistakes in these sentences? Pause the video here. Number 1. This needs to be in single quotation marks because it's a quote within a quote. And then I'm going to end the quotation from Pam. Number 2. Here you need single quotation marks because again, it's a quote within a quote. Number 3. I need to put quotation marks around the title of the short story. Number 4. The article title needs to be in quotation marks. The publication, the name of the magazine, needs to be in italics. And we put book titles in italics. So now I hope you have a better idea of how to use commas and other punctuation marks. Please go to Canvas and take the quiz. And also email me if you need any help or have questions.